So we're going to tackle the very difficult conversation of trauma. So I just want to first and foremost say, this is for educational purposes only. Take what works for you. If it doesn't make sense, disregard it. If you're in the middle of trauma and you need help, reach out to a professional. I mean, if it's life or death, obviously call 911. But this is more conceptual information that in a safe setting can really help heal. And there's no reason why it shouldn't be just something that we do here on property, that we work with our clients one-on-one. I want to get this information out to anyone who is suffering from trauma. And so the whole idea is how to work through the pain. So from the liability standpoint, treat this like a TED Talk. It's just informational, it's there for you. We want to make sure that you get help. So with the legal jargon of educational purposes only, this is not therapy, all that information, it's just basically, we're going to go ahead and dive into a very difficult topic, have an incredibly difficult conversation, but on the other side is how to heal through trauma. So let's dive in. I broke it down into steps. I got little bullet points here to make sure that we stay on track, because I am known for running down rabbit holes. So anyways, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So the first is recognizing the triggers or the stimulus. So it's super basic. Basically, there's an event that happens. So I'm not talking about the actual traumatic event. I'm talking about the trigger or the stimulus that brings that up. For most events, it has happened once or maybe a handful of times somewhere in the far distant past, somewhat recent past, but for most people going through this, it's not a reoccurring issue. It's something that happened in the past. And so what we first have to do is identify what is the stimulus or trigger. So this literally triggers off that conditioned response that's already within us. It keeps us staying in the pain where we feel stuck and can't progress. So let's look at the language that we're using. There's a trigger. Takes me back to this horrific memory, what happened to me, the trauma surfaces. I feel hopeless. I do not see a solution or anything changing in the future, so I get stuck. And what happens when you get stuck? You can't move. So the whole purpose for this first step is to actually unstuck yourself, if you will, to be semi-clever, is to really unstuck yourself. How we do that is, well, first of all, let's talk about the conditioning aspect. I'm sure you guys remember this way back in the day, Pavlov's dogs. He did an experiment where he went ahead, he would put out food and ring a bell, and the dogs began to associate this bell with the food. The bell by itself has nothing to do with food, but through conditioning, he was able to train the thought process to condition where there's a stimulus or a trigger that would endorse or I guess set off a chain of thoughts that weren't even conscious. It triggered this stimulus, it triggered this response, and then all of a sudden dogs will start to salivate. So for Pavlov, I'm sure you're well aware, no food there, ring the bell, they start salivating. Their brain says, oh my gosh, there's food, where is it? Excitement, release, all sorts of stuff. When we experience trauma, it's really no different. As weird as this sounds, and when I say this, I don't mean it flippantly as if it doesn't matter, but what I'm saying is it's a conditioned response. Our mind automatically starts to associate things together. And so working with a lot of veterans, working with different people from violence, different things, let's take a loud bang. There's an association. They associate that unconsciously with the gunshot or whatever it is that goes off. Even though it could have nothing to do with a gun, it could be a backfire, it could be someone slamming a book down, but this conditioned response says, fight or flight, oh my gosh, let's look back very quickly in the unconscious, and this all happens like that. Let's look back, what is the last few events or the last biggest traumatic event? And we're gonna get into emotions. What is the biggest traumatic event? Oh my gosh, I remember I was shot at, or something horrendous happened with this loud noise, so we go into fight or flight. So the first thing is understanding that this was conditioned by that. Once I take a step back, I can then look and assess and say, wait a minute, this has been a conditioned response. I have linked these two together. I have put these two together like peanut butter and jelly, if you will. I've put these two together in my mind. These go together every single time, and this is what keeps me alive. Once we understand that, we can start to recondition in a different way. So that's the first step, is understanding the trigger or the stimulus. What it is that set that off. In this example, the loud noise set it off. In your example, think back. What is the trigger or stimulus? When X happens, when I go into a certain type of experience, I get triggered, the trauma resurfaces, it's in my mind. We want to look to isolate that and understand, oh, okay, these are the triggers of the stimulus that I've conditioned. Here's a real simple analogy, and it's amazing because it still works, and I'm going to share openly with mine. So almost everybody remembers their first kiss or their first breakup, right? So for me, I remember my first horrific breakup, and for some reason the song that was on the radio when we went through it, emotions are raised at the highest level, all the emotions are running through, releases the chemicals in my brain, and then all of a sudden, a certain song comes on. Now, every time I heard that song, I could be in a very happy place with friends, that song comes on, boom, all of a sudden, I don't understand why I feel so sad, I feel a loss. It was because unconsciously my brain linked that heightened level of emotion with a certain song in this pain of the first true, deep, sincere breakup. So what's interesting is as I started to learn this, I learned, okay, this was unconsciously conditioned. How do I recondition the stimulus? So in this certain case, it was a song. I thought, how do I link this song to something else? Now the first thing that comes in is you have to have a heightened level of emotion. When there's a traumatic event, our emotions tend to be at the peak. Whatever we link or anchor to associate that, we now have this conditioned response on the unconscious level. So stick with me. I know we're getting a little geeky, but stay with me. Once we identify that, now we can look at what is a different heightened level of emotion that I can tie to the stimulus to recondition. Here's where it gets kind of trippy and crazy. So you can go through a therapist and different professionals. I'm just going to share again for educational purposes only. I'm going to share with you. So what I did is I went skydiving. I don't necessarily recommend this, but I played that song on a loop as I was in the plane. As I was driving out there, and the plane just played it again on a loop and loop and loop. And so I thought about that when I jumped out. Now, here's what's interesting. Because I had a heightened level of emotion, I now have this new conditioned response, this new trigger or stimulus, or not new trigger stimulus. Using this trigger stimulus, I have a new set of emotions, new memories to link to that. So now here's what's interesting. I've done it a few times. Now, every time I hear that song, I go to this beautiful place of this adrenaline rush and how fun it was. It was a bonding experience with my dad. The first time I was skydiving was with him. The other times, it was different places around the world. So I have linked this incredible memories to this new stimulus, this new trigger. So now I no longer go and think back to the breakup. I'm hoping, because the topic matter, it's not that big of a deal. It's not, oh my gosh, how traumatic. I've had other traumatic experiences, but I want to share with you the idea behind it, because if you understand the idea or the theory behind this, then you've got a shot at really reconditioning. So that's just step one. Step two. We tend to resist the memories. Think about pushing back. Anytime I try to resist something, I don't care how big or small it is, something, somewhere, someone gets hurt or broken. So think of it like this. It's an avoidance technique that we use. Now some say, well, heck yeah, of course I want to avoid it. Of course I'm going to resist it. Of course when the thought comes in, I'm going to try to do whatever it takes to stuff it or throw it aside or whatever that is. But why is that so important and detrimental that we do not avoid it, we do not resist? Here's the reason why. It creates an open loop in the mind because there's resistance. Here's what I mean. If I do this, how many of you went, ooh, maybe you didn't physically do it, but in your mind you did it. Here's the lesson behind this. Our brains are set to have closures in loops. When it starts to go and there's no closure, just like twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder. Do you feel that? Oh, what you are. Even if it's just minor, and again, this is just for educational purposes, so these examples are not huge and are not traumatic, but the whole part is to educate you so you can see the framework behind this, because once we understand the framework, we can change it. So our mind wants to close the loops. So if this traumatic experience, I unconsciously or consciously start to relive it, as soon as I resist, as soon as I do, the brain goes, wait, we didn't get that release. We didn't get the closure. We didn't get that closed loop. And so that's why it plays again and again and again and again and again. So here's what we want to start doing. So this is going to sound crazy. A, you want to make sure you're in a safe place with safe people. You don't want to re-trigger too deep. But here's the idea. There's something called double disassociation exercise. I do this on all the areas that have been traumatic within my life. And as you get to know me, I open up to those I trust in my circle. But it's pretty incredible. So I'm just gonna go ahead and explain the exercise. And again, educational purposes only. So picture yourself in a movie theater. Maybe it's your favorite movie theater, but picture yourself and you're there alone. Everything is locked, you're safe, no one's coming in, you're totally fine. But I want you to go ahead and to look up the screen. And as you do, this is where it gets really important. This is how you actually are able to play the tape forward and through, but not experience it heavily. So in your mind's eye, so close your eyes, and I'm gonna do it with you actually right now. Close your eyes, and as you're sitting there, picture the red carpet, drape, whatever it's called, goes up. As it goes up, now picture yourself floating out of your body. So you can actually see your physical body, but now it's just your spirit in your mind's eye going up in the projector booth. And on the other side of that projector booth, you are inside. It is bulletproof glass. I'm talking nothing's coming and you don't have to worry. So here's what we do. It's enough of a distance that we can watch ourselves watch this memory. So now go ahead and play the tape where you are watching yourself, whatever the memory is. I've actually done this with a lot of different clients and even some of our staff. So I'm gonna give you one of the examples. So this individual was in a car accident and was horrifically frightened. Anytime they go anywhere around the scene where they got in the accident, they go into a full panic attack. Anytime they got into a certain type of truck, they go into a full panic attack. So we use this experience, if you will. And so she went ahead, she closed her eyes, she's in the booth looking down. So check in with yourself, okay, I can see myself watching, so I'm removed and I'm safe. So you go ahead and you play the tape forward. So as she was watching down, she was able to see herself on the screen and she started to explain it. She said, okay, it's playing, we just got hit, we're rolling, it's actually slow motion, I'm rolling, I can see a quarter coming up and it hits her on the face. She went through the entire vivid process. She said, okay, and now it's at the end. So we did a check-in. How do you feel? She goes, oh, I'm feeling it, but it's not nearly as bad as it was before. I said, okay, where do you typically stop this memory? She said, oh, actually a while back. I said, okay, where are you? Well, I'm just lying there. I said, what happened next? Or what would you like to happen next? She said, the responders came out, they cut me out, they took me in, and I was really shaken up. I had bruises, I had broken things. I said, okay, how far forward do you have to go to where you knew you were okay? You knew it was gonna be okay, you were alive. She went, oh my gosh. She said, actually, I didn't remember this memory, but as soon as the responders showed up there and they cut me out, I was actually safe and I knew I was gonna be okay. I said, okay. So as we're looking through, how do you feel right now? She actually started feeling okay. Now you can take this another step forward. So again, the whole idea is to learn how to play it out and not re-traumatize yourself. So one of the things that we started doing that's actually gonna get here in the next level is, so we wanna recognize the level of intensity, the level of emotion that we're having. So what's interesting is the mind sees this as unrecognizable chaos. When we are experiencing this traumatic event, the mind just sees unrecognizable chaos. It's just this whole chaotic event that's kind of going all over. It doesn't make sense. We tend to stuff it. So here's the solution. We go back to the theater, and then here's what we can start to do. So she said she saw it in color, so we said, let's watch it black and white. When she watched it black and white, I said, now is that heavier? Is it harder to see? Or do you feel like you're there, or is it actually lighter? She said, oh my gosh, it's not nearly as bad in black and white. I said, okay. Now, try moving closer or further. So make the screen smaller and further away, so it's a tiny screen, and try bringing it up. Which is easier? She said, further away. I said, okay, so far you're saying if it's black and white and further away, it's not as traumatic. Correct. I said, okay, what if you put some music behind it? What if it was crazy, funny music like the circus or something like a child's lullaby? And so she actually went through, played it far away, black and white, with this weird theme music behind. She went, oh my gosh, I asked her, do you feel like you're traumatized right now? She opened her eyes and said, no, actually it's the first time I've been able to replay the tape, actually allow it to play and know I'm gonna be okay. So again, in this third step is understanding how we can actually increase or decrease the intensity or the emotional aspect by doing something as simple as making it further away or closer, black and white, louder or softer. You can kind of play with the different senses. But the whole point of this is, again, to really show the framework of what it looks like in order to go through your traumatic event in your mind where it's not as big as an issue as it once was, so you can let the tape play. So the final thing, we've kind of already done this, is we want to confront it and expose it. That's how we actually are able to heal. And so when you're there, you can, whatever the moment is back in the theater where you're watching yourself watch, you can actually pause. You can, if you feel safe, out of there, you can actually go into the screen and walk around, kind of like the Matrix. You can pause it and you can walk around and look at that event. What this does is it starts to scramble the brain. It starts to disassociate this intense level of emotion with this memory that literally keeps us imprisoned in this whole experience, or not experience, but keeps us imprisoned to this future, earlier event. And by understanding that this event is in the past, but I am either consciously or, for most people, unconsciously reliving this, I'm keeping myself traumatized. And so as you observe, you can walk around, you can break it down. Now, I like to actually have a voiceover, if you will. And I don't know if you remember Steve Irwin. He was the crocodile hunter. Oh, why, it's a beauty, oi! And what I would do is, where's the sounds for my traumatic events, I would actually go through and have the narration, oh, look at it, oh, that's bloody gorgeous, or oh, that's bloody terrible, that's crazy. The more animated it is, the more I'm able to view it from a different standpoint than this heavy emotional burden of going, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. So those really are the 4 steps. And again, it's so much easier in a controlled setting. We're sitting down and being led through, but I wanted to at least expose you to this, if you haven't heard of it, of how to actually work through the pain from traumatic experiences where A, it's safe, but recognizing, oh my gosh, I unconsciously relive the trauma again and again and again. And when you understand the framework, then it becomes a conscious choice of saying, wait a minute. Number 1, I've identified the trigger or the stimulus, so now I'm aware of what sets off this event that makes me go to that place. Number 2 is understanding I don't want to resist it or avoid it, because that actually perpetuates it, because the mind wants to finish it. But I can actually go into the mind's theater, if you will, and replay it in a safe place where I'm removed, either once looking up or twice, the double disassociation, watching myself go through this experience, that I don't feel the crazy trauma that happened in the past. And then number 3, understanding how I can play with the intensity level of the emotions, so I can either fully feel it or have it go back and really be less of an issue now than it was back then. And finally, the 4th thing, confronting and exposing it and having a new narration that sometimes actually is comical. I know it sounds crazy, but I've taken so many people through this experience that at the end, they're able to actually add some weird, trippy, comical aspect that helps alleviate this imprisonment. So I'm really hopeful that these 4 steps will help you get through the trauma in order to work through the pain, so you don't have to keep reliving that traumatic experience again and again and again. If you would like a free copy of our Recovery Habits Blueprint system, just shoot us a DM and we'll send it right to you.